doing? (1970) October to 1973 October. Arriving on the scene, a good fight. On November 28th, we sent the Charity Commissioner the new sales agreement and requested that he grant us permission to proceed with a payment arrangement for the purchase in time to meet the December 1 deadline, November 28th, for the December 1 deadline. Quote, in the supplementary agreement we wrote, it is stated that the conveyance must be executed by the 1st December 72, time being of the essence. In view of these facts, we shall be grateful if you will kindly grant us permission for the payment of the balance of the purchase amount to be statutory charge. I don't know what that means. Statutory charge on the property in fulfilling the noble and charitable objects of the capital S Society, unquote. On the 29th, the Charity Commissioner requested that I meet him in his office the following day to discuss our application. Meanwhile, Mullah and Mullah, as we had instructed, returned to Chinman Lal Shah 2 draft conveyances approved by them and reapproved by Ambu Bhai and Dewanji solicitors, one for the front vacant portion of the land and one for the back built-up portion. They stated that if the two conveyances required that the land be subdivided by the municipality, we would have to insist upon only one conveyance, but that if Nair obtained the required consent from the municipality, we would have no objection to two conveyances. Quote, please further note that our clients are consulting their architects as to whether it would mean a subdivision of land if the two conveyance deeds are executed by your clients in their favor, and per the municipal rules, it would require prior consent of the municipal corporation. The letter concluded, immediately our clients hear from their architects. In the course of the day, they will revert, unquote. Soon thereafter, our architects, Motilal Khanna and Associates, wrote Mullah and Mullah, it is our considered opinion that only one conveyance should be made in the sale of the above property. Since the vendor appears to be the sole owner of the holding, two separate conveyances will be tantamount to subdivision. This, in our opinion, would be illegal. For your ready reference, reproduce below an excerpt of a circular number CE/ bunch of numbers from 1971 of the city engineer of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Bombay, unquote. With so many negotiations in process, Prabhupada had us put up 300,000 rupees payable on execution of the conveyance according to the supplemental agreement dated November 24. And on November 30th, the day before the deadline, Mullah and Mullah wrote Chimanlal Shah Chiman Lal Shah. Quote, in order to show their bona fide for completing the sale herein, our clients have requested us to inform you that they have deposited a sum of 3 lakhs rupees, being the amount payable on the execution of the conveyance deed herein, as per the terms of the supplemental agreement dated 24 November 72. Paragraph continuing to quote, also, as per the said supplemental agreement, our clients await from you, prior to the completion of the sale of their certificate of title of um, Ambubhai and Diwanji, certifying that your client's title to the property is clear, marketable, and free from encumbrances subject to the High Court suit number 94 of 1968. As your clients have also undertaken to make out a marketable title, our clients also await your client's certificate under Section 230A, 230A of the Income Tax Act. There were many loose ends to be tied up and only one day to do it. Paragraph. Meanwhile, Mr. Nair claimed that our insistence on only one conveyance made it impossible for him to meet the deadline. Thus, on the same day, November 30th, Che Man Lal Shah wrote to Mullah and Mullah, it is surprising that when the sale is said to be completed on or before 1st December 72, time being the essence of the contract, your clients at the last moment came forward with a suggestion for one conveyance, and thereby making it impossible to complete the sale on or before the 1st December. Such conduct on the part of your clients amounts to a breach of contract on the part of your clients. Unquote. That being said, quote, without prejudice, Nair agreed to executing one conveyance on condition that two things. The new draft conveyance be drafted in the course of the day and reach Chi Man Lal Shah the next day for approval in order to be executed on December 4. And 2, we would be responsible to get the stamps transferred from the 2 deeds of conveyance to the single conveyance. Or 3, if the stamps on the engrossments of the 2 conveyances were not transferred to the proposed single conveyance, the cost of the new stamps would be entirely borne and paid by us. Paragraph. On December 1, and we're only, in December 72. On December 1, Mullah and Mullah sent Che Man Lal Shah the draft of the proposed single conveyance, writing, quote, please return one copy of the draft duly approved by you at your earliest convenience to enable us to engross the same. Please also send us the stamped engrossments of the 2 previous conveyance deeds, unquote. Later in the day, Mullah and Mullah asked Chen Man Lal Shah to have Nair return a declaration required for the sale. The exchanges went back and forth throughout the evening, well past normal business hours, each side demanding certificates and other documents from the other, each side's lawyers accusing the other of failing to fulfill the requirements of the agreement, and each side making excuses and justifying its behavior. It was complicated and disagreeable. The machinations of corrupt people. As Prabhupada commented later, Nair was thinking, this man has no money, so just involve him, and whatever money he gives us, I shall take it. But that one thing was sure, Prabhupada was sincere in a desire to complete the transaction and ready to do whatever was required legally according to the agreement to make it happen. Prabhupada waited a week for the conveyance to be executed, but then he had to go to Ahmedabad for a Pandal program. He departed on December 2, leaving us with strict instructions to pursue the conveyance and secure the land. But 2 days later, we asked our solicitors to return the money we had deposited with them, stating that we were no longer interested in purchasing the property. Dear sirs, for attention of Mrs. K.F. Mehta, sale of property at Juhu by Mr. Nair to ISKCON. Due to the inability of the vendor to fulfill her part of the supplemental agreement for sale dated 24 November 72, the said supplemental agreement, as well as the original agreement of sale of 8th February 72, stand terminated. Therefore, we are no longer interested to purchase the property. We request you to return us the sum of rupees 3 lakhs deposited by us with you on 28th November 72. Thanking you, yours faithfully, for ISKCON SD, Secretary. As the days passed, and it became clear that Mr. Nair was stalling in an effort to renege, to cheat us, some of the devotees again questioned the wisdom of purchasing the Juhu land. Shamasundar in particular thought the agreement and the whole project was a big mistake. After Prabhupada had left for Ahmedabad, Tamal Krishna Shamsundar, David and myself and a few others shifted to Mr. Valia's Heliopolis flat. Anyway, in Kolaba, which was conveniently located for our fundraising, our work on the Pandal program, and our efforts to procure the Juhu land. Shamasundar discussed the issue of Juhu with Tamal Krishna day and night. The tenants might not leave the property, he argued, and the land itself and its location was not a good choice. It was just a jungle, overrun with snakes and rats and bugs. No place for a temple and hotel. Life there was very austere, and it was too far from central Bombay. Quote, it was terrible, Tamal Krishna later described, far away from the city, and we had to travel by bus and train 2.5 to 3 hours every day. It was unbearable. Questioning Prabhupada. Ooh. Shyam Sundar even suggested that Prabhupada was aware that his decision had been in error, but was too old and stubborn to admit it. Adding to their displeasure, neither Shamsundar nor Tamal Krishna wanted to have to stay in Bombay fighting with Nair. If we continued the legal battle, they were thinking, we could be fighting for years, and they wouldn't be able to go anywhere, do anything else. We would be suffering, and there wouldn't be any good results. Even if we did get the land, the project would drag on for many years and take over our lives. The best thing they thought would be to cancel the agreement, retrieve the money, and get out of the whole thing. That way we wouldn't be stuck with the Juhu land, and they wouldn't be stuck in Bombay. I didn't agree with her thinking, and certainly not with the idea that Prabhupada could be seen in such mundane terms, or was not capable of assessing the situation and making a good decision. I didn't even like hearing things put in those terms. In fact, I completely opposed to what they were doing because I knew how much Prabhupada wanted the Juhu project to succeed. But Dravida and I were junior to them, and we weren't able to change the way things were going. They had the authority, and they canceled the agreement. In Ahmedabad, Prabhupada remained concerned about Bombay. He requested Nair and Mr. Dewanji to come there and try to reach final settlement, but they declined. And he had not heard or been able to get in touch with Shamsundar or Tamal Krishna. I'm very much surprised to not hear from you about the Nair affair, he wrote to them. I have tried to contact you by phone, but it is understood that you have left Mr. Valia's place and they could not say where you are. We have sent a telegram today, reading as follows: anxious to know progress with Nair call urgent. Prabhupada had a feeling that something might go wrong and that Shamsundar and Tamal Krishna might want to cancel the agreement. Vishakadasi had just arrived in Ahmedabad from Bombay to see, hear, and photograph Prabhupada at the Pandal program, and he called her to his room. Tamal and Shamsundar and Juhu, he said, and I suspect they may cancel our sales agreement with Nair. I've tried phoning, but I cannot get through, and telegrams may not reach them. I'd like you to return to Bombay and tell them under no circumstances should they cancel the agreement. Vishaka took the next train to Bombay and conveyed Prabhupada's instructions. But when she arrived the following morning, it was already too late. What Prabhupada had foreseen had already happened. The sales agreement had been canceled. Even then, and even though Prabhupada had personally sent Vishaka to speak to them, Sham Sundar and Tamal didn't want to listen to what she had to say. She was just a woman, they thought. What could she tell them? They thought that they knew what they were doing. Dravida and I had been shocked when we heard about the cancellation. We knew that without an agreement, we had no legal standing. We had neither gotten back our earlier payments, nor did we have any claim to potential ownership. But when Vishaka delivered Prabhupada's message and we saw how she had been treated, we became even more upset. I immediately called Prabhupada in Ahmedabad. He rarely spoke on the phone, and I had never spoken to him over the phone before. But the situation was critical. Bhaktivedanta Swami here, I heard Prabhupada when Prabhupada got on the line. To hear his voice was itself a tremendous spiritual experience. For a second, I felt great ecstasy, despite the seriousness of the matter at hand. Yes? He asked, when for some moment I did not reply. His question brought me back to the situation at hand. Srila Prabhupada managed trembling. This is Giriraj Das. Vishaka came and brought your message, but they didn't want to listen to her because they thought she's just a woman. Yes, yes, he repeated. Srila Prabhupada, I finally blurted out. They canceled the agreement. Prabhupada was silent. Then in a grave voice, filled with anger, concern, and resignation, he said, then everything is finished. He asked me another question about the money, but I didn't know the answer. You are phoning me and you don't have the information? You are also useless. I told him that Shamsundar was thinking of leaving Bombay and coming to Ahmedabad to speak to him. Yes, that is good, he replied. Let him come. Then, understanding that I was in anxiety about the whole situation, he said, "Don't be anxious." And then he hung up. When Prabhupada phoned Tamal Krishna to find out what had happened, Tamal Krishna tried to explain that they had seen there are many defects with the agreement and so had canceled it. "You couldn't cancel it," Prabhupada said. "Yes, we did cancel it," Tamal Krishna replied. And then, Tamal Krishna recalled later, all I heard back was click. No further discussion. Somehow or other, by the powerful illusory energy, it was in our mind that Prabhupada had given us the right to decide what to do that was needful. And we took that to mean that we should decide whether it was better to cancel or to go ahead with it. Without Prabhupada's knowledge or approval, he and Shamsundra had gone back and forth with the lawyers, trying to find a way out of the deal. And the lawyers had provided a host of reasons why the sales agreement was not good. If we wanted the money back, they had said, we should cancel the agreement. Unless we did, if we fought the case in court, the funds would be held in abeyance. We would have to file suit, and it might take over a decade to get the money back, if we ever did. We didn't have much experience in these legal dealings, but we knew we didn't want the funds to be locked up and possibly lost. Ultimately, based on this line of thinking and guided by the lawyers, after Prabhupada had worked on the agreement for 2 years, Tamal Krishna and Shamsundra had canceled it in no uncertain terms. Quote, due to the inability of the vendor to fulfill her part of the supplemental agreement for sale dated 24 November 2072, the said supplemental agreement, as well as the original agreement of sale, 8th Feb 1972, stand terminated. Therefore, we're no longer interested to purchase the property. It was basically due to our spiritual defect that we did not carry out Srila Prabhupada's desire, Tamal Krishna later admitted. It was so clear and strong a desire, yet we couldn't see it as such. We thought that Prabhupada had made a mistake. We began to feel, oh, we've got to get out of this agreement. We've got to cancel it. And our lawyers showed us how we could do it. I know it sounds unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me also, but we did it. It was very unfortunate. It was one of those things when the disciple has his independent intelligence and independent desires that are separate from the spiritual master. It was a very big mistake. As Prabhupada later explained, our lawyers had their own vested interests, and although we were ostensibly their clients, they were not actually working on our behalf. The land was worth more than the agreed sales price, and the agreement was perfectly sound, but they didn't want us to get the land. They had, we eventually learned, been in cahoots with the other side. So there we were, still on the land, but with no legal standing, no agreement, no claim, trespassers. All we could do was go to court and ask for a return of our deposit. But Prabhupada did not lose his spirit or hope. Quote, I shall be the last man to give up the Hare Krishna land to the rogue Mr. Nair, he wrote to Captain Singhal from Ahmedabad on December 15th. He has taken our money, but tactfully has not given us the conveyance. And on the same day, he wrote to Mrs. Singhal, we have neither changed our plan, nor have we any intention of changing our plan of developing Hare Krishna land in Bombay. We shall stick to the place to the last moment, and we require your cooperation very much. He was already planning how to rectify his disciples' mistake. No money had yet been transferred, so perhaps it was not too late. Harikesh had made a life member of S.R. Vakil, one of the main lawyers in the entire Tata Corporation corporate empire. And when Mr. Vakil heard about our difficulties, he cited a law that gave us protection, even though we had canceled the agreement. The Easements Act dictated that if you leased a property and built a structure on the property, then even after the lease expired, you had the right to retain the structure. So that was what we would do. Mr. Nair had given us permission to build our small semi-permanent temple, and now we would claim that even though the sales agreement had been canceled, we still had the right to keep the temple, regardless of the status of the sale. Anyway, that was our argument, though it wasn't the strongest. Prabhupada would have to return to Bombay. Until then, nothing more could be done. When Prabhupada arrived in Bombay, there was a rousing reception at the airport, including our friend, Biharilal Khandelwal. I had avoided telling Mr. Khandelwal about the difficulty with the land because I was afraid he would not give his donation of 1 lakh rupees until the dispute was resolved. I thought that at least I would let him give his donation first, but when Prabhupada met him at the airport, he informed him about our problem with Mr. Nair and told us to give him the legal papers and ask for his help. My heart sank. Adding to my apprehension that Mr. Khandalwal might hold his donation until the problem was solved, Tamal Krishna and I were concerned they were asking too much of him. But Prabhupada said that although the case might be a big thing for us, for Mr. Khandalwal it was small. He might be having so many cases like this going on. Because we did not have a proper place for Prabhupada in Juhu, we often arranged for him to stay with friends in Bombay. In Ahmedabad, Kartikeya Mahadevia, an early life member and supporter, had offered to share his flat at Sea Face Park. 5 buildings built in a horseshoe formation with the sea at the open end. And after they had spent 4 days in his own flat, Mr. Mahadevia arranged for Prabhupada and some assistants to move to the flat of his recently deceased brother, Kumud Chandra, in another building in Sea Face Park, and the rest of us stayed at Mr. Valia's flat. While Prabhupada had been in Ahmedabad, Shamsundra had shared with me his assessment of ISKCON. He thought that the leaders wanted only yes men who would follow instructions and go on Sankirtan without being independently creative or intelligent. Therefore, we were not attracting quality people. He had ideas of how the society could be expanded in the West, but he didn't think we had anyone capable of approaching professors, or other intellectuals. Thinking of my own background and inclination, I had told Shamsundar that I was acquainted with many leading intellectuals, if not personally, at least through their writings. I felt that I could meet and communicate with them and attract them to Krishna consciousness. He had thought it was a great idea. Yes, this is what you should do, he had said. You are wasting your time in India. You are just rotting here. You should go back to the West and preach to these intellectual leaders. Oh boy, the talk had bewildered me. Much of what Shamsundar said seemed to make sense. It did seem that I was suffering in Bombay, fighting with Nair, and I had always felt I should approach the educators and intellectuals in America. And when I had spoken with Prabhupada in Calcutta about my future service, he had mentioned that I should go to the universities and get books accepted as required reading, so I wasn't sure what to do. Finally, though I did not like to bother Prabhupada with unnecessary questions, I realized that he was the only person who could provide me with an answer. So I approached him in Mr. Mahadevia's flat. Shamsundar, I told him, thought I could be better engaged by going to the West and preaching to the intellectuals. Prabhupada listened quietly while Shrutakirti gave him a massage. Then he says, suppose you are massaging Krishna's leg and you think, now I would like to massage his right leg. That is also service to Krishna. But Krishna may be feeling that actually he wants more massage on his left leg. Hearing Prabhupada's words, I understood that Krishna wanted me to remain in Bombay. Actually, Prabhupada said, your service here is more important. Hearing this, I immediately abandoned my idea of preaching in the West, offered my obeisances, and left the room. Later, when I considered what Prabhupada had said, I concluded that I had been foolish. Obviously, Prabhupada wanted me in India. If he had wanted me to go to the West, he would have said so. And Prabhupada himself was concentrating on India, especially on Bombay. He had already written me that Bombay was, quote, the richest city, the gateway to India, and in all respect, the most important city, unquote. Really, I could have figured it out for myself, but Prabhupada had been kind and merciful. He had given me the answer and had not seemed to mind the question. Also, while we were staying at Heliopolis, a letter arrived for Prabhupada from Mr. Brijrantan Mohata, asking spiritual questions. We rarely replied to such letters ourselves, but Prabhupada was not in Bombay, and Mr. Mohata seemed to be a substantial person with spiritual interests. I thought I should meet him as soon as possible, so I phoned his office and made an appointment. Mr. Mohata was everything I had anticipated, affluent, intelligent, and inquisitive. As it turned out, he was one of the most prominent businessmen in Bombay and was married to the daughter of Seth R.D. Birla of the illustrious Birla family, the wealthiest family in India. Mr. Mohata was one of the leaders of the Vishva Hindu Parishad, the world's most famous Hindu organization, whose goal was to unite and strengthen all Hindus. But he was also a staunch impersonalist. And when I began preaching to him about Bhagavad Gita, he started to give me his Mayavad philosophy. Quote, when Krishna says me, he claimed, he doesn't mean Krishna, the person. Krishna is not Krishna. Krishna means something else. Krishna, he said, means the supreme truth, the impersonal one, the all-pervading Krishna, who is greater than the person Krishna and could come in any form and lived in everyone's heart. When I told Prabhupada about the meeting, he said, First of all, if Krishna is not Krishna, then who is he? Mohata? And is Mr. Mohata not Mr. Mohata? Does Mr. Mohata also mean something else? Second, even assuming that the impersonal absolute is greater than Krishna, how do I benefit? You should ask Mr. Mohata. What is more valuable? You to you. 10 lakhs rupees distributed with 1 rupee in everyone's pocket, or 1 lakh rupees in your pocket. Even if Mr. Mohata believed that the all pervading Krishna was greater, Prabhupada was saying, he would get more benefit from the person, Krishna. And again, he gave a perfect analogy according to the mentality of the person. Another wealthy impersonalist, Dr. N.D. Desai, also lived in C. Face Park and often came to meet Prabhupada and argue with him. Dr. Desai was both intelligent and educated, but he was a follower of Swami Chinmayananda, a Mayavadi impersonalist, and would present all sorts of impersonal arguments, which Prabhupada would promptly and thoroughly defeat. Then Dr. Desai would approach Swami Chinmayananda and tell him, Bhaktivedanta Swami said such, and Swami Chinmayananda would tell him what to say in reply, which Desai would do, only to have his arguments smashed again. Like this, Dr. Desai went back and forth between them, but eventually he realized that Prabhupada's arguments could not be refuted, and further, the Prabhupada was of impeccable character, and his heart softened. Out of respect, I would offer my obeisances and listen to Prabhupada, Dr. Desai recalled, but I was a Mayavadi, and I would also argue. With him, I would say, Brahman is supreme, not Krishna. Brahman takes the form of Krishna, Rama, Nrsimha, etc. Prabhupada would tolerate my nonsense and give me prasad. He would ask, who has told you all these nonsense things? I would reply, my spiritual teacher is Chinmayananda Swami. Prabhupada would say, oh, that rascal. He's the biggest Mayavadi. Ask him, if you're Narayana, why are you getting old? And why are your teeth falling out? And why is your hair getting gray? Why you're not looking young like Narayana? This is all nonsense. God is always God. He doesn't become God. We are always Jivatma and will always be Jivatma. We are parts and parcels of God, and the part and parcel can never be the same as the complete whole. So I'd go back to Chinmayananda Swami and ask him, Swami, why do you get old? If you control Mother Nature, why are you getting old? Can you not control that? And he would say, I have to look old so that people respect me more. I'd go back and tell Prabhupada he has to look old because people will respect him more. And Prabhupada would say, that is rascaldom. Nature is under Krishna's control, not under Chinmayananda's control. He will always be controlled by nature. You go and tell him that. He would usually quote some verse from the Bhagavad Gita, like the verse where Lord Krishna says, I'm the seed-giving father. How could Swami Chinmayananda be the seed-giving father of everybody? Again, I'd go back and tell Swami Chinmayananda. Eventually, Prabhupada asked me to invite Chinmayananda Swami to come and have a debate. Ooh. I asked Prabhupada, what point shall we debate? He said, we shall debate whether Chinmayananda Swami will lift Govardhan Hill or not. If he's God, he should be able to do that. God, Krishna did it. If he knows what's in my mind and everybody's mind, then he's God, Paramatma. But if only he knows about his own body, that too not fully. He's just another human being who's trying to cheat God and trying to cheat everybody else. I asked Chinmayananda Swami, are you prepared to have this debate? It'll resolve this awful doubt I have now as to which of you two is the real spiritual master. But Chinmayananda Swami refused. I asked Chinmayananda Swami, can you please tell me whether you know what's in the minds of everyone? God knows what's going on in everyone's mind. Can you do that? If I sit down now and think of something, would you be able to write down what I was thinking? He said, no, I'm not a mind reader. I said, no. I'm not talking about reading minds. If you're really an elevated level, you are one with God, then it would be like you're plugged yourself into a computer that has so many facts. You should be able to retrieve information. He couldn't do it. Then I surrendered to Prabhupada. During this time at Sea Face Park, Prabhupada often brought up his disciples' blunder in canceling the Juhu agreement. He held Tamal Krishna, his GBC representative for India, especially responsible, and Tamal Krishna underwent continual humiliation. Often, when Prabhupada received a life member or other friend, sympathizer, or supporter, he would show them the agreement, explain what had happened, and point to Tamal Krishna and say, this is the foolish boy who canceled the agreement. He is so foolish, so inexperienced. This is what he did. And he would make Tamal Krishna sit there and hear the chastisement again and again. It was a huge blunder on our part, Tamal Krishna later acknowledged. There were many more such blunders, but Prabhupada's wonderful quality through them all was that he never gave up on us. No matter how many mistakes a devotee might make, Prabhupada would see if that person wanted to continue to serve Krishna, he would stand by that devotee. Prabhupada knew that there would be mistakes, and he would chastise you like anything, but he never gave you the sense that he didn't love you. Despite all the grand mistakes that were made, I never got the sense that Prabhupada loved me less because of them. I always felt encouraged, not discouraged, despite our many mistakes. In the instance of the contract cancellation, Prabhupada did not reject me. He gave Giriraj and me the opportunity to go through a hellish year and a half of regularly going to Bombay, sitting in lawyers' chambers, trying to rectify the situation. Unquote. Tamal Krishna did whatever he could to make up for his mistake, and for months, he spent up to 8 hours a day in lawyers' offices. As he later described his and my activities, on Dalal Street, Bombay, the sight of a Western sannyasi with danda in hand, accompanied by a bespectacled young man carrying a heavy briefcase, became a common sight to the solicitors and their clients who normally frequented the street. Giriraj and I, as Prabhupada's representatives, pleaded the case of Radharasa Vihari, making continuous rounds from the lawyers' offices to court in a transcendental drama that lasted over a year. Actually, our position seemed hopeless, but we kept trying different strategies. Every day, all day, I would go out into the city and meet with people. When approaching prospective contributors, if someone didn't want to become a life member, I would ask him to take an advertisement in a publication. If he didn't want to take an ad, then I'd ask him to buy a set of books. If he didn't buy a set of books, I would ask him to give a donation. or at least buy one book, or at least give something to help. And in the evening, I would go report to Prabhupada about my preaching. Paragraph. At the end of it, one day, I felt particularly discouraged. I'd gone to many people, and most of them had refused to meet me. And the one or two I had met were not interested in helping. Not one person had contributed in any way. When I explained this to Prabhupada, he said, "Don't be discouraged. If you sincerely try your best to please Krishna, Krishna will be satisfied, even if others are not." Paragraph. I considered Prabhupada's words. The people I had met may not have been satisfied, and so they had not contributed. And even the devotees may not have been satisfied, since I had not achieved any desired results. But if Krishna was satisfied, what else mattered? I understood that if I sincerely tried to serve Krishna without any other motivation, Krishna would be pleased regardless of the results. Back to Mr. Nair. Mr. Mahadevia ran a cloth business, including some Muffet-Lal retail stores. His older brother, Kumud Chandra, had been the head of purchases for the Muffet-Lal textile companies, a responsible position for a trusted person. Arvind Muffet-Lal was the head of both the family and the group, which was the third wealthiest in India. His father and Mr. Mahadevia's father had been in business together for many years, and Kumud Chandra had been married to one of Arvind's sisters. Arvind was also a leader of India's Gujarati community and a great philanthropist. In fact, the family was renowned for being pious and religious people of impeccable character with strong connections with the government. They were especially respected for their charitable work. Mr. Muffet-Lal distributed food to thousands of people in impoverished areas, and whenever there was a flood, drought, famine, or other disaster, he would take a leading role in providing for the victims. They served nutritious vegetarian food to hundreds of thousands in need, and people often spoke of them with reverence and adulation, usually reserved for the gods. Many times when we would meet persons to enroll them in as life members and get donations, they would ask, "Have you met Arvind Muffet-Lal?" And we were embarrassed to have to say no, we have not. Finally, after I tried for many months to get an appointment, Mr. Mahadevia arranged one. It was with both eagerness and trepidation that I entered Mr. Muffet-Lal's office building, Muffet-Lal House, at Back Bay Reclamation, rode up the lift, and entered his office. After Mr. Muffet-Lal greeted me from behind his large desk, I sat down and began telling him about our philosophy and some of our activities in India. When he described his food distribution and free eye camps and other charities, however, the discussion became somewhat contentious. I objected that feeding needy persons and giving medical relief were karmakanda. Mr. Muffet-Lal insisted that such activities were bhakti. We disputed a bit, but I didn't want to alienate him by arguing, and eventually the meeting ended without a conclusion. When I returned to Seaface Park that evening, Prabhupada asked how the meeting had gone. I related the incident. "It's karmakanda," I asked. "Is it karmakanda?" Prabhupada replied that Mr. Muffet-Lal's activities were in the category of charity. Charity is recommended for householders, he said, and he praised the activities of those who served in this way. I could see from the way Prabhupada was answering that he wanted me to appreciate Mr. Muffet Lal's philanthropic activities, but then, after telling me how good they were, he acknowledged that they did not actually fall in the category of they did actually fall in the category of karma kanda. His point, I understood, was that my attitude toward karma kanda, should be sympathetic rather than condescending. We should appreciate the service of those who we met, even if they weren't on the highest platform, and not feel that we were superior. Another time, while collecting ads for a Pandal program souvenir book, I met a shipping magnate, Mr. Kotak, at his residence. I'd hardly begun to describe our activities when Mr. Kotak interrupted and asked, "What can I do for you?" "Actually," I said, "we have come to do something for you." "What can you do for me?" he countered. "Engage you in the service of the Lord." But Mr. Kotak objected. "How is my serving Krishna going to help me?" he questioned. "It is going to help you." I tried to point out the mistake he was thinking, but he was just too stubborn, and finally I gave up. "Anyway, we're having a big festival across Maidan, and we were hoping you would place an advertisement in our special issue." To my surprise, Mr. Kotak immediately agreed. "Oh," he said, "if you want some money for your festival, we can take an advertisement." But he held to his point. "This is not for my benefit," he insisted. "You are not doing anything for me. I am doing it for you." When I related the incident to Srila Prabhupada, he replied that preaching requires humility. Quote, "A preacher should always be humble," he said. "The gentleman knows that by serving Krishna he will gain. Otherwise, he would not give his hard-earned money. Businessmen always calculate their profit and loss. If he did not think he would gain by giving to Krishna, then he would not give. Only artificially he was posing that he was not getting any benefit, that he was simply doing it for us. Preaching means that people should conclude that by giving to Krishna, they will gain, and voluntarily they should give. That is preaching, but a preacher should always be humble." I appreciated Prabhupada's instruction. Even though personally we had nothing to gain if donors served Krishna, and they had everything to gain for their benefit, and ours, we should be humble and approach them as beggars. I was reminded of an incident in Indore when Prabhupada had gone to see a wealthy man, a leading citizen, and requested him to become a life member. After speaking to him for some time, Prabhupada had shown him the books. "I already have these books in my language." The man said, "I don't need any more." "I have not come here to sell you some books," Prabhupada replied. "I've come here as a beggar at your doorstep." At that, the man's attitude immediately changed. "Oh, yes," he said, "I will become your member." Swamiji, "I will become your member." Wow. Still, Prabhupada's preaching was strong, and he didn't hesitate to tell things as they were without coating. Lokanath had initially been disturbed by this. He had thought, quote, "High-class people are coming all the way from the city, and here is a sadhu telling them they are fools and donkeys and hogs and dogs. Can't Prabhupada use more choice terms?" But as the months passed, Lokanath found himself using the same language, and he realized that it was appropriate. Prabhupada was straightforward without holding back. "Why flatter?" he would often say. He wanted to dismantle people's false ego and bodily concept of life. And he delivered Krishna's message undiluted and unadulterated. He was truly representing Krishna because Krishna, too, in Bhagavad Gita did not flatter. He used terms like mudha, rascal, asura, demon, and Prabhupada was repeating his message, mudhas, naradamas. I observed, though, that after speaking like this, Prabhupada would be courteous and friendly. He wasn't thinking that these people were rascals and that he should avoid them. He always made sure they got prasad and were encouraged in Krishna consciousness. One could see that he hated the sin, the meeting, gambling, intoxication, illicit sex, but separated the sin and the sinner. As he had said in Boston, at Brandeis University, we admit everyone. Our mission is to elevate people from the down state of life to the highest state of life. Jesus Christ also said, you do not hate the sinners, but hate the sin. So people may be sinners. We raise them to pious life, but we say, don't do this. Don't do the sinful act. Don't take intoxication. Don't do this. Don't do this. We hate the sin, not the sinners. If we hate sinners, then where is the possibility of preaching? He was endeavoring to remove the sin. At the same time, he was extremely affectionate toward all the sinners. Actually, Lokanath's reaction to Prabhupada's strong words was similar to Prabhupada's initial reaction to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's preaching. When Prabhupada first met his spiritual master, he noticed that Bhaktisiddhanta would criticize particularly any person or ideology that was presented to him. Prabhupada later commented that at first he had been thinking, doesn't he know how to do anything besides criticize? But eventually he realized that everything Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had said was right. One day, Lokanath came to see Face Park to inform Prabhupada about the activities in Juhu. 50 or 60 people were attending the evening programs, he reported, which pleased Prabhupada. Oh, that is very nice. Lokanath also received second initiation at Sea Face Park because the wooden altar in Juhu had silver plating that needed polishing, and Lokanath was thin and small-bodied. A Maitali, the head pujari, Maitali, the head pujari was not. Maitali had him climb onto the altar to clean it. Lokanath started doing artis, and in time, he became the head pujari. Even with spending much of the day in discussions about legal matters and maneuvers regarding the Juhu land, Prabhupada gave 2 lectures daily, including speaking in the evening at Kumutchandra Mahadevia's flat from December 26 to July 11 on the Nectar of Devotion. His lectures were the highest of the day for us, one of the highlights of our lives. All day long, we've been looking forward to the evening, to being with Prabhupada and hearing him speak. Most of us had never heard him discourse on the Nectar of Devotion, which was meant especially for devotees. Generally, he spoke on Bhagavad Gita because the knowledge of the Gita, beginning with I am not this body, was meant particularly for new people. But since we were in the Sea Face Park flat without outsiders, he was able to speak to our level of understanding. When Prabhupada spoke, the devotees sat in rapt silence, erect and attentive, and after the lectures, we would go over what he had said and share our realizations. He lectured on the meaning of pure devotional service, Anyabilasha Shunyam, etc. Prabhupada often used the term pure devotional service or unconditional devotional service, but I'd wondered what exactly that was. I thought it must mean that one was ready to perform any service for the spiritual master, but I wasn't sure, so I asked. Unconditional devotional service, Prabhupada replied. Unconditional means spontaneous. Prabhupada's talks on the Nectar Devotion were both profoundly philosophical and relevant to issues that we were facing. In his first talk on December 26, he raised the question of black money in relation to Krishna consciousness. Pradumna opened by reading from the preface. Sakara Malik, who was later to become Srila Sanatana Goswami, took advantage of his brother's personal money, which had been deposited with a village banker, and escaped from the prison of Hussein Shah. In this way, both brothers joined Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada commented, sometimes it is questioned that Sanatana Goswami paid the money in black market. He chuckled and continued, yes, actually he paid. When the Nawab Hussein Shah imprisoned him, he was a minister, and the superintendent of the jail had been working under him. So Sanatana Goswami requested that, I have done so many times your benefit, now you do me one benefit, you let me go. Although the Nawab had imprisoned me, I am going to be a peer or a religious instructor. The Muslims are very much respect the peer. And actually, he was going to be a peer. He renounced family life and became a Goswami. I am sacrificing my life for God, and you just help me in this service. And not only that, you'll get some material profit also. So he offered 5,000 gold coins, mohurs. Now, the question is whether this kind of black marketing or bribing is required for spiritual life. And the answer is that everything is required provided you can satisfy Krishna. That this is the principle according to time and circumstance. Just like on the battlefield there was fighting, and Krishna advised Yudhisthira that you go and tell Dronacharya that your son Ashwatthama is dead. Krishna is advising him to speak a lie. And Yudhisthira hesitated. How can I speak a lie? I never spoke a lie in my life. When there is fighting, they adopt all means. The aim is how to own victory. Although there are so many international laws, they don't care for them. The point is that as people act by hook and crook, everything for satisfying the senses, gaining some material profit, any means, if need be, can be accepted for Krishna's service. Everything can be accepted. Otherwise, how Sanatana Goswami is bribing? How can Krishna be advising Yudhisthira to speak a lie? There is a verse, Mam nimite kritam papam punya eva kalpate. Sometimes it appears that this is a sinful act, but it is done for Krishna. He was quoting a part of a verse from Padma Purana, which also appears in Hari Bhakti Vilas. For my sake, man nimitam kritam papam api dharmaya kalpate. So Prabhupada was cutting it short. For my sake, even committing sin is understood to be dharma. Neglecting me, even an act of religiosity, turns into sin due to my influence. Our bhakti, Prabhupada continued, is anukulyena krishnanushilanam. We have to satisfy Krishna. Krishna is asking me to tell a lie. Yes, I shall tell a lie. That is bhakti. If I consider, I've never spoken lies in my life, how can I speak a lie? That is not bhakti, because it is pratikula, against the desire of Krishna. Common people cannot understand this. They'll shudder. He was enunciating a general spiritual principle that was especially relevant to his work in India. In general, he advised his disciples to follow the laws of the land and to act in the mode of goodness and exhibit the qualities of a Brahmana. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 42. Prabhupada continued, they think, oh, Krishna is teaching Yudhisthira, such a nice man, religious person, and he's teaching him to speak a lie. Krishna is being quoted from Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti mamuta manushim tanamashrita. If someone thinks like that, he becomes a mudha. Yudhisthira declined to follow Krishna's order, although ultimately he agreed, and his hesitation or reluctance, based on some material calculation, is not appreciated by pure devotees. Before Yudhisthira told his lie, the wheels of his chariot would never touch the ground because he was so righteous. But after he lied, his wheels did touch the ground. The mundane interpretation is that he fell from his position because of his lie. But the devotional interpretation is that he fell because he had hesitated to follow Krishna's instructions. There are many instances, Prabhupada continued, just like the gopis in the dead of night when Krishna played his flute. They left their husbands, fathers, brothers, children, everything, and they went. Now, according to our Vedic system, young women leaving the protection of father, brother, or superiors and going into the forest for another boy, oh, it is very sinful. Socially, it is sinful. And Krishna instructed the gopis, what have you done? You go back immediately. And they began to cry. This description is there. So from the social point of view, this is sin when the gopis went to Krishna. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj stood without any protest when his father was being killed, and Bali Maharaj rejected his spiritual master when he, Shukracharya, had said, don't promise. He's Vishnu. He'll take everything of yours. Don't promise anything. Bali Maharaj said, he is Vishnu? And you're asking me not to promise to him? Oh, I don't want such a spiritual master. I reject you. To reject one's spiritual master is a great sin. From social point of view, religious point of view, these are religious, sinful activities. To reject one's spiritual master, to see one's father being killed in one's presence, one woman is going to another boy in the dead of night. Superficially, these are all sinful activities. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends Ramya Kadachit Upasana Vrajavadhu Vargena Ya Kalpita. There is no better upasana, method of worship, than was conceived by the gopis first class. Superficially, it may sometimes appear against the social and religious rules and regulations, but if it is done for Krishna, anukulyena. Bhakti means Krishna should be satisfied. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the whole world is going to hell, but if Krishna is satisfied, a devotee is prepared to do that. That is Uttama Bhakti. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Uttama. You'll find in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabhilasha Shunyam, not to make business with Krishna. I shall be devotee of Krishna provided my everything is adjusted all right. I shall not be sinful. I shall not do this. I shall not do that. My family will be kept nicely. All these conditions. Just like people go to Vrindavan, after all the money is distributed, there are many persons, and they make sure their sons and grandsons are all right, that you send me 200 rupees per month, and all the 2 crores of rupees are for you. That is not for Krishna. And simply for my eating, you send me 200. There are many in Vrindavan. Krishna is also very intelligent that 2 crores of rupees you earned with hard labor, and that is kept for your children, and you've come here with empty hands, and for your food, 200 rupees? Yayatam Mamprapadyante. Prabhupada chuckled. No, the first principle is that one should be prepared to sacrifice anything, everything for Krishna. Everything. It doesn't matter. My fate, my honor, my money, my prestige, he doesn't care. Krishna must be satisfied. Take, for example, Arjuna. Arjuna didn't like to fight, to kill the other side, his brother, his grandfather. No. But when he understood Krishna wants it, yes. Krishna vachanam tava. That's all right. This is Krishna consciousness. No consideration for anything else. Simply satisfy Krishna. Satisfy Krishna or Krishna's representative, same thing. That is bhakti. Anyabhilashatushunyam jnana karmadhyanavartam jnana. It should not be tinged by jnana. This is jnana. Oh, I'm going to speak lie. I'll go to hell. I'm going to kill my grandfather. I'll go to hell. This is called jnana, knowledge. But the definition is jnana karma janavratam. It should be untouched by jnana and karma. Untouched. Yes. This is pure bhakti. Anyabhilashatushunyam jnana karma janavratam. The gopis are not gyanis. They're ordinary village girls. What gyan they have? No gyan, no karma. They did not know what is karma, what is sacrifice. They did not know. We should be prepared to sacrifice everything without any consideration of jnana, karma, yoga. No, we have to see whether Krishna is satisfied. People have no information who is Krishna, what to speak of satisfying him. So-called learned scholars have no idea. But a bhakta is always ready to sacrifice everything to satisfy Krishna. Prabhupada was not only instructing us in the principles of pure devotion, he was explaining himself to us, his own mood of being ready to sacrifice anything and everything to satisfy Krishna. As he had told us in Calcutta, his motto was, everything for Krishna, nothing for myself, and so he never complained. Quote, but if one has no idea who is Krishna, he continued, then where is bhakti? For the impersonalists, there cannot be any bhakti because they have no information of Krishna, and bhakti means satisfaction of Krishna. If I know the person, if I know his nature, then I can know how to satisfy him. If you have no information of a person, then where's the question of satisfaction? The point here is that Sanatana Goswami, Sakara Malik, was so mad after meeting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that whatever money he had with the village banker, and even if it was sinful to bribe, he didn't care. He resigned his service as minister. Therefore, he was imprisoned. Now, to get out of prison house, he bribed. He was so much ecstatic. This is called lalyam. Lalyam means just like when we become very much greedy to achieve some success or receiving something, sometimes we become mad. That is required. Lalyam api mulyam ekalam. To achieve Krishna consciousness perfectly, this ecstatic eagerness or greediness to serve Krishna, that is the only price to achieve success in devotional service. That is the only price. Not money, not anything, not prestige, not good parentage, not beauty, nothing. Simply this ecstatic, intense desire. How shall I get Krishna? Then you'll get Krishna. He'll take you. That is the example of the gopis, intense desire. Tatram lalyam apimulyam ekalam. This ecstatic desire that I, this life, shall get recognition by Krishna. That I have sacrificed everything for Krishna, that this is required. What a challenge and what an opportunity. That's the end.